Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just another tinfoil hat. Welcome to my show. Today, we are going to be discussing the sprawling phenomenon of paranormal dogs. Hellhounds, devil dogs, barghests, wished hounds, el cadejo, fairy dogs, black dogs, the devil's dandy dogs, shucks, shocks, church grims, and the muckle black tyke. That is simply a handful of the countless names for this phenomenon, which appears, perhaps aptly so as man's best friend, across countless cultures and belief systems. And like many aspects of the paranormal, we get to see that while the stage may sometimes change, the players often remain the same. Much like the infamous orbs or woman in white, these anomalous dogs are not restricted to any one particular branch of paranormal intrigue. As a matter of fact, to get through all the really extensive lore on this topic would take one heck of a lot longer than we have across these two episodes. So here we have a brief-ish breakdown of the many paranormal manifestations of man's best friend. Before we begin, I really want to pin down too that I am by no means dogmatic about any of the labels or classification systems I'll be referencing throughout these videos. Rather, I'm just conveying these reports as they were initially perceived and believed by the initial witnesses, which of course will be flavored by their particular belief systems. If someone sees a big, giant, spectral black dog with flaming eyes and they've grown up in the Christian tradition, they're really likely to believe that it's something demonic, if not the devil itself in doggy form. Whereas if someone sees that same anomalous canine and they've grown up steeped in fairy lore and believing in the realm of the fairies, they're likelier to, say that it's some sort of manifestation involving the fairies. So, again, I don't really believe that any of these labels are an explanation for the phenomenon at hand, or paw as the case may be. Rather, I simply use these systems of classification exactly as that, a way to kind of organize the reports, and it gives me a place to start. So, with that being said, here we go. We're going to start with hellhounds, cases where the witness believed that they were dealing with something demonic in doggy form. Probably one of the most well-known and often repeated cases comes from an attack on not one but two churches in the English county of Suffolk, August 4th of 1577. At the church in Blytheburgh, a huge black dog appeared in a clap of thunder, bursting through the church doors. It ran all up and down the nave, caused the roof to collapse, killed two people, and left scorch marks on the church door. Now again, like I just mentioned, this was actually a 2-for-1 deal. On the exact same date at the Church of St. Mary in Bungay, there was a very similar attack which was recorded by the Reverend Abraham Fleming in A Strange and Terrible Wonder. A huge black dog appeared running all up and down the aisles of the church, and then it passed between two people who were praying for salvation from this mysterious beast. As it did so, their necks were snapped clean backwards, and they, as the Reverend says, strangely died of their injuries. Now this beast also left scorch marks on the church door, referred to this day as the devil's fingerprints. And the Reverend, in his paper on this mysterious attack, referred to the beast as this black dog or the devil in such likeness. Near Budleigh Hill in Somerset, a man was paced by a giant black hound with fiery eyes as big as saucers. Apparently he was only saved because the beast could not cross running water. So it gave up the chase and vanished in a flash of fiery light. The inability to cross running water is something that comes up time and time again in reference to the paranormal, notably some hauntings and also vampires. Moving from the old world to the new, we have el cadejo, which is a common tale across South and Central America. Now, with this phenomenon, there's actually two distinct dogs, a black one wearing a white necklace and a white one. And one is usually portrayed as a protective or guardian type figure, specifically accompanying either people walking late at night or drunk guys out late at night back to their homes. The other one is viewed as, quite the opposite. Apparently it attacks people in kind of a spirit possession sort of way. Now, if both dogs show up to the same person at the same time, they will engage in attacking each other. Interestingly enough, the name El Cadejo derives from the word cadena, which means chain, and this is a reference to the fact that many times El Cadejo is observed dragging a chain behind it. This is also seen in many of the European cases. Moving north, the Wendigo is said to have been able to shapeshift into large black dogs among other animals in some traditions. And of course, we also have the infamous Hellhounds of Mary Dean. Now this area, in addition to being haunted by the ghost of a young woman named Mary Dean, is also home to a pack of giant, translucent, immaterial, red-eyed hellhounds. And to make matters even weirder, when we jump over to the similarly named town of Meriden, Connecticut, we also find another black dog, the black dog of the ominously named Hanging Hills. Now this particular shuck follows the common folkloric patterning. The first time you see it is for luck, the second time for misfortune, and the third time for death. Now before we move on from hellhounds, I'm going to end with an account which, among such assorted names as Shrieker, Trash, Padfoot, and Barghest, has the distinct honor of having the most fantastic name I have ever heard for this phenomenon. the Devil's Dandy Dogs. Now, this particular pack comes from Cornwall, a place which for some strange reason has far more than its share of stories of people supposedly meeting the devil himself. Now, while there are many stories of this particular pack of hellhounds throughout Cornwall, one of the most common deals with a herdsman who's wandering home late one night when he comes across this pack of hunting dogs and their demonic master. Like any great Hollywood exorcism, they're successfully warded off with a prayer, which unfortunately did not work so great for the poor unfortunate souls at Blytheburg and Bungay. Moving on, we also have the infamous dogs associated with fairy lore. As a matter of fact, fairy dogs are pretty much a tagged member of our good neighbors, often appearing in accounts of fairy-human interaction. In Scotland, there was a family who would often have a little white dog manifest in their home, and they took this as a precursor to the arrival of the company, which was a benign euphemism for the fairies. So immediately, everyone in the home would drop what they were doing and leave out fresh water in preparation for their guests. Now, in Ireland, at a particular rocky knoll on a particular hour of the day, a little dog would appear wearing a white necklace. Shades of El Cadejo, anybody? And then, of course, again in Ireland, you have the puka, which is a fairy dog, known for either being very large and white or very large and black. Though, much like the church grim or the wendigo, it could appear in any form that it wanted, it often chose the form of a dog, and appeared at places that the fairies frequented, such as bodies of water or crossroads. Now, sighting the puka, much like other anomalous dogs, meant either very good or very bad luck. On to the folkloric phenomenon known under the simple umbrella term black dogs. Known for haunting specific locations, but notably among these, crossroads, certain stretches of road, or bodies of water. The black dog phenomenon is often viewed as incredibly ominous, if not downright malevolent, although there actually are some accounts where the being in question acts almost as a guardian or protector, and we'll get into those cases in a minute. We're going to start with a classic, though, that of the Littleport, Cambridgeshire black shuck. Now, this is a centuries-old tradition of a huge black spectral hound with glowing red eyes, and those unlucky enough to stare into its hypnotic gaze die within the year. The shuck was most dangerous on roads, bridges, and crossroads, though apparently the Littleport beast favored the banks of the Great Ouse River between Brandon Creek and Littleport Bridge. However, according to folklorist W.H. Barrett, this particular shuck hadn't been seen since a fateful night in 1906, when a well-known resident of Littleport was driving home when this giant black hound ran out in front of him on the road. Unable to stop in time, the man braced himself to run over the giant creature when it simply vanished. And that's actually something I've heard from more recent ghost and cryptid reports. Now, a commonality between a lot of reports of the black dog phenomenon is this belief that they are a portent of death, doom, or misfortune. You know, a word of warning here, if you happen upon a giant black dog with fiery eyes on Winsford Hill in Somerset, do not approach the creature, otherwise you will die. If you stand still, the dog eventually will disappear, leaving only its eyes glowing where it once stood. Now, as soon as those fade away, you're free to leave, though no doubt you will have some bad luck. In Stapley, a dog larger than a hound, which is either white or black but always has glowing eyes, haunts a particular lane and is known as an omen of death. And then in Somerset, there's a seaside road known by the affectionate name Death Mile, which has yet another death omen doggy. Peel Castle in the Isle of Man is supposedly haunted by the Maudie Doo, any relation to Scooby-Doo is up for debate, which would appear in a certain corridor after dark and disappear down that same corridor before dawn. Now, the soldiers stationed there actually saw the beast so many times that they got used to it. However, one death is blamed on it. Apparently, a drunkard one night dared the beast to follow him, and, that seems like a really bad idea, and it was. He died within 3 days. We've already discussed the black dog of Hanging Hills, which follows the common folkloric pattern of threes. The first time you see it is for luck, twice for misfortune, thrice for death. Now, not all sightings of the black dog signify death or misfortune. As a matter of fact, some are downright helpful. We've already seen that El Cadejo is viewed as both a malevolent and protective figure, and there are a lot of stories that follow this exact same notion. That some spectral dogs seem to function almost as guides or protectors, often, though not always, of a lone woman walking late at night. A woman walking past a group of rowdy men in Lincolnshire in the early 20th century found herself accompanied by a mysterious dog. And then in Toronto in the late 1800s, a young woman's path took her through a patch of woods that she was afraid to traverse alone. All of a sudden, this dog appeared out of nowhere, accompanied her through the woods and up to the door of the farmhouse she was visiting. When it was time for her to leave, the dog reappeared, walked with her through the woods again, and up to the door of her house, where it promptly vanished. Now, in Somerset, there was a group of women who actually let their children run about without fear, because they knew that the girt dog would take care of them. And again in Somerset, One winter afternoon, a man climbed the Quentock Hills when a sea mist moved in. Absolutely lost and fearing that he would freeze to death, suddenly within his grasp he felt what he believed was his own dog Shep, there to rescue him. The dog led him back to his home, where Shep was actually barking at him from the doorway. The man looked down to see then what had led him back to his home, and it was a large dog, which grew gradually larger and then finally faded away. On we go to the portion of the phenomena which is somewhere between the very folkloric black dog and the more paranormal ghost dog. According to Somerset Folklore by R.L. Tongue, a particular crossroad between Selworthy and Tivington is haunted by a big black dog, which was thought to have come from an instance where a coffin fell and this deceased skull actually cracked open, allowing the ghost to escape. There are a few great ghost accounts here, including that of the Prior's dog, which apparently accompanies a spectral prior on its walk, and the black dog of Hewish Barton, which, although it is regarded as the ghost of the family dog, and was even observed standing with its deceased master under a tree, also people claim that it was most often spotted lying across the threshold like a Barghests, which is a really interesting thing to note. Now, whether in life or death, witches are also associated with black dogs. Near Stogrousie in Somerset, there's the aptly named Witch's Tree, which is supposedly haunted by a black dog, which is actually the ghost of one Harriet the Witch. As a matter of fact, at one point in time, a motorist even threatened to sue whoever owned the big black dog, which had jumped out in front of him on the road. Now, cemeteries are commonly haunted by shadow dogs or ghost dogs or hellhounds, perhaps a relic of the church grim, which I'll get into next episode for a little bit. Some famously haunted graveyards include the New Enterprise Free Will Baptist Church Cemetery in Bainbridge, Georgia, which has a giant black dog which howls and leaves no tracks. The churchyard of Northope in Lincolnshire is supposedly haunted by a Barghest, and a large black dog roams the St. Louis Cemetery in New Orleans. And of course, Bachelor's Grove Cemetery in Illinois has had many sightings of the spectral ghost dog. Most specific of these hauntings would probably be the hauntings of gallows and jails, and the first of these to come to mind is probably the black dog of Newgate Prison. Apparently, following the murder and cannibalization of a man accused of witchcraft by his inmates in 1596, a large black dog appeared in the jail, stalking the perpetrators of this ghastly deed, to the point that out of sheer desperation they killed their guards and escaped the prison. However, according to the lore, it didn't do any good. The spectral hound actually hunted them down and stalked them one by one until they all had finally died. Now, this mysterious Fido faithfully then appeared at Newgate promptly before executions for decades to come. Now, another gallows site haunted by one of these spectral hounds is found in Tring, Hertfordshire, when in the year 1751, an old woman and her husband were accused of witchcraft and illegally killed by ducking, as opposed to legally killed by ducking, which it would have been had this occurred some decades earlier. Although a crowd of 5,000 people was collectively responsible for this dreadful deed, the man who instigated most of the violence and charged money to view it was none other than a chimney sweep named Thomas Colley. Yes, you heard me right, Colley, like the dog. Now, Colley was found guilty of murder and hanged, and after that point in time, his place of execution became haunted by a classic hellhound, a giant black dog with glowing red eyes, which had the habit of melting like a shadow into the ground. Alright, so the classic connections to the paranormal dog entity have been detailed and are pretty clear. They're really steeped in traditions of the ghostly, religious, or occult, and folkloric. And I'm going to say, for the record, that what we've covered here has barely scratched even the surface of the tip of the iceberg. Genuinely, books have been written on this particular topic. However, we are going to take a sharp left turn at Albuquerque and talk about some more recent manifestations and connections with the UFO phenomenon. Now, among many of the manifestations of the paranormal hotspot known as Skinwalker Ranch is also the appearance of a giant, gray, tame, bulletproof wolf. Now, the first appearance of this giant canine, the family was actually so calm around it and so convinced of its tame nature that they were actually thinking they could keep it as a pet. As they were thinking so, it turned around and absolutely slaughtered a nearby calf. As it escaped, they fired at it, but again, it managed to escape totally unharmed. Moving on, a classic UFO/black dog case comes from the exceedingly bizarre encounter of Alan Godfrey. Now, the totality of his experience with the unexplained is summed up really well in Jenny Randall's book, The Pennine UFO Mystery, so I'm just going to jump to the matter at hand here. While searching for some mysteriously displaced cows, policeman Alan Godfrey's attention was attracted by a bright light up ahead on the road. Thinking that it was probably a bus, he somehow still felt compelled to go check it out, and was face to face with an object shaped like a top, lined with 5 dark windows and a metallic surface. His radio did not work when he tried to call back to base, so he decided to sketch the object, and then he was 100 yards down the road with about half an hour of missing time. Now, there are already really a million interesting things to note about this very classic flying saucer case, but again, this is a show on black dogs, so why am I bringing it up here? So Godfrey, who was absolutely confused by this event, decided to undergo regression hypnosis to see if he could find any truth about the event. Now, regardless of what regression hypnosis actually reveals about missing time, which both Godfrey and Randall's are clear they're not dogmatic about, what came out was really kind of interesting to note. To the surprise of everyone involved, amid a really classic alien abduction type scenario, complete with a tall, kind of surgical suited entity, as well as 8 smaller, horrible entities, Godfrey shouted, "There's a bloody dog in here." He said that it was a big black dog, as big as an Alsatian, just sitting there inside of the UFO. On a quick note, Godfrey has had other bizarre encounters with strange dogs, or dogs reacting to strange phenomena. One of the first occurred when he was 18 and driving with a friend. He thought that a woman and a dog had stepped out on the road in front of him and he had run them over. So of course they got out of the car to see what had happened. There was absolutely no trace of anything. However, both Godfrey and his friend had 2 hours of missing time. And then again, when he was dating his future wife, she came over to his home and said that she found a black Labrador which came up to her and licked her hands. That particular dog had been dead for 2 years. Randall's also uncovered another story from 1912. 2 children on the beach in the Isle of Muck were approached by 2 little men in green who cast a spell on them, eventually trying to convince them to go offshore onto a strange boat where another entity and a dog were waiting. However, my favorite account of UFO black dog connection comes from David Webb's 1973 Year of the Humanoids. Apparently, 10 big black hairy dogs ran out of a landed UFO and ran all throughout the purportedly haunted Laurel Grove Cemetery in Savannah, Georgia. Talk about an intersection of belief systems. Well, on that exceedingly bizarre note, let me tell you that we will definitely continue down this strange road in part 2 of this episode series, where I'll discuss theories and patterns between all of these different paranormal manifestations of man's best friend. And of course, if you enjoyed this episode, please like, and if you're new to this field of crop circles, go ahead and subscribe to see what weirdness the future may hold. Until then, you can check out my podcast on the Paranormal UK radio network, also called Just Another Tinfoil Hat. New episodes every other Monday, and all past episodes available for download on Podbean. And if you want to keep up with whatever else I might possibly have going on, you can go ahead and check out my website, which is also called, if you can believe this, justanothertinfoilhat.com. For today, I am Zelia Edgar, signing off.
Doing.